This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Hi, Agit Tavach. We're going to speak about a very important subject today. We're interrupting our regularly scheduled broadcast, a regular scheduled Shiur on Sefer Shana Halachos. We know now is the Zman of the year. It's a shtickle Bein Hazemanim now. It's Yeshiva week. When I was a kid, there's no such thing as Yeshiva week. Maybe they gave off on a Friday towards the end, like Ba'achras Hayamim, when the end of my Yeshiva, maybe they gave off on one Friday. Anyway, what is this inyan of Yeshiva week? What is the concept of Bein Hazemanim? There's a famous tshuva in the Igros Moshe in Yardea Chela Gimel Sim Pei Daled. Rabbi Moshe was asked, should students be given off on Sunday? Moshe said, it's asur. It's asur to give off on Sunday. It's prohibited. I'm talking about for boys. I'm talking about Lashon Limud Kodesh. We can give off. Give off? Torah is Kihem Chayinu V'Orach Yameinu. Every day is an entity unto itself. Every day has to be infused with chiyus. So Moshe says to give children off on a Sunday is antithetical to chinuch. What are we telling them? That on Sunday you don't have to learn Torah? In the Sefer Shvivei Ar, I'm reading to you now from the Sefer Igeres Leben Torah, written by Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef from about the Hashkafa of Rabbi Vadia. He brings from Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank. He said that people who on vacation they need to go swimming. They need to make sure that as they're making their body healthier, they have to make sure they're not weakening their soul. So therefore, you need to chacham lev yikach mitzvos, that you should make sure you have with you at all times the Sefer Ketzois HaChoshen, so that when you have a minute here, a minute there, you're not being mevatel from your limud. Or a different Sefer, because you can't have a day that you let the mind go by idle. By the way, that's a very good hanhaga in general, that if a person is not able to learn and they have to go out, they should always have a sefer on them. You're at a chuppah, you should always have a sefer with you. Now it doesn't mean I see people, they bring in their chas and shas, and they're sitting there at the chuppah. Nobody said you have to advertise what you're doing. They also have pocket size. You can make a photocopy and keep it in your pocket. But the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is a mitzvah that devolves and rests on a person throughout the day, always. And therefore, whenever a person goes on any trip, they always have to have a sefer on them. That's like, it's not a chumrah. It's not a chumrah. I remember I once asked Rosh Hashiva, is it yuhara, is it gaiva, at a chuppah or at a trip to have a sefer with you? Is that gaiva? We know that there's a concept that if other people are not doing something, for you to stand out and to do it, it's arrogant. So is it considered arrogant to have a sefer with you to learn at a time when other people are just wasting their time? So of course it's not gaiva. Yuhara is something that's not an outright obligation. Something that's a chumrah, you don't do when other people are not doing it in their presence. That's the concept of yuhara. Yuhara is a mili de chasida, something which is a pious practice. Other people are not doing it, you don't do it in their presence. But the Talmud Torah is a mitzvah d'oraisa. It's a mitzvah hagisa b'yom v'layla. Okay, you have to go to a chuppah. It doesn't mean you have to sit batel for 45 minutes while every third cousin is walking down the aisle and they're playing Uncle Moshe music. Why do you have to waste your life because they've held you hostage in this hall? So nobody said you have to take out a massive volume Torah Beis Yosef, but you don't have to be mevatel zman. Shaus Teshuvos Az Nidbaru. He brings that if somebody during Bein Hazemanim is traveling to the ocean, so go what you need for your own health, but aside from that, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is at all times. So the question is, what exactly then is the purpose of Bein Hazemanim? If the most important mitzvah in the Torah is Talmud Torah, to give off a designated amount of time, say, okay, go home and eat and do I don't know what would the tachlis of Bein Hazemanim be? So here are a few important things to think about. I want to present you with a very important question. There are many mitzvahs in the Torah that the Torah does not obligate you to do. For example, donating to the Mishkan. It says, Me'ez kolish asher yidvenu libai. So Beryl, he's a generous guy. He's giving a lot of gold to the Arayin. Feivel, he's a stingy guy. He's not giving anything. It's question, are you supposed to give money to the Mishkan or you're not supposed to give money to the Mishkan? If you're supposed to, everyone should give. If you're not supposed to, then no one should give. Why is the Torah leaving it up to your personal discretion? Or a Nazir. Should a person be a Nazir or should a person not be a Nazir? Do you have to be a Nazir? Do you not have to be a Nazir? If you have to be a Nazir, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe aleimar, Tzavos b'nei Yisrael, v'yiyu Nazirim. And if it's not a good thing, then Hashem should tell Moshe, tell people not to be a Nazir. But other yadir, what is this thing? Here, there's something called a Nazir. If you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And most notably, there's something called a Nadava, a Karban Nadava. Harei olai oila. A neder, a nadava. Is a person supposed to bring a carbon nadava or not? If you're supposed to, there should be a command, everyone should bring a carbon nadava. And if you're not supposed to, Hashem should say, nobody should bring. What are these mitzvahs that are left up to your personal discretion? Anyone have any thoughts about that? What do you say, Meir? Why are there mitzvahs in the Torah that are just up to your discretion? Either you should have to do them or you should not have to do them. But what's the idea that there are mitzvahs that Hashem says, if you want to do it, you could do it. So the Stipler wrote a sefer on Chumash called Birchas Peretz. My uncle, Rabbi Tzvi Hirschwang, bought this for me in Tafshin Samach Zayin. That's what, 16 years ago? Yeah. The Stipler says a very important idea, and that is the concept that there are mitzvahs in the Torah that you're not obligated to do is Yisoid Gadol Hasagas Ahavas Hashem. Because we know there's a mitzvah in the Torah to love Hashem. So he said, hey you, love Hashem right now. Well, what am I supposed to do? Well, we know the Rambam tells us that the way to come to the love of Hashem is by thinking about Hashem's greatness. Or the Chavos HaVava says that a person comes to Avas Hashem by thinking about all the kindness that Hashem does for us. But what about somebody who is not that focused and his mind is a little bit clouded and his heart is clouded and he doesn't have the capacity to come to Avas Hashem by studying creation and by studying all the kindness Hashem does to us? How does a person come to love Hashem? Love Hashem! Either I do or I don't. How do you tell a person to love Hashem? Says the Stipler, we have to take the advice of Mesilas Yesharim. Mesilas Yesharim says, what about somebody who's not that zarez? He's a little bit lazy. I don't know anybody like that personally, but I heard there's some people, it's hard for them to come to shul or to come to learning or to drag themselves out. What about somebody that's not feeling a draw for Avodas Hashem? So Mesilas Yesharim says that even though feeling is not within our control, action is within our control. And Mesilas Yesharim brings the great principle, it's called Hachitzonios Ma'ireres Es Hapnimios. Outer actions stir the inner being. So if you don't really love to daven, you know what you should do? You should run to shul. And when your mind and your heart feels yourself running to shul, the way the psychology of that is, if I'm doing external actions that seem to be zrizus, it will inspire zrizus within me. So now, the question is, should a person shuckle when they daven? Sometimes people get really revved up. Maybe they should. If they're trying to stir their leiv and their neshama, then the external actions will fire up their inner being. It's called chitzonios ma'ireres es hapnimios. It's a very important tachbula in avodas Hashem, because it's not so easy to change your heart and your soul, but it is easy Action isn't within your capacity. Feeling is not within your capacity.
Similar to Shalai Lishma Balagani.
Yeah, it's similar to Mitach Shalai Lishma Balashma. There's a part of me that I can't control so much, the part of me that I could control. But through what I'm able to control, I could access what I have a more difficult time controlling. I can't feel excited about learning, but I could act as if I am. And using that trick to make myself more excited. So says the Stipler, what if I don't really have such Avas Hashem? So Hashem gave us a great opportunity. He gave us a mitzvah you don't have to do. And when I then go to the Mishkan and I donate gold to the Mishkan, the way my mind works is, I don't have to be doing this. Why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I love Hashem. I want to do more than I have to do. So that will awaken my heart and I'll start to feel Avas Hashem. You hear, Meir? You want to explain the concept? When you do an action that you don't have to do, it wakes up your heart and for something that you start to feel that way. So says the Stipler, let's say a person is having a difficult time feeling a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By bringing a carbon nadava, a carbon that you don't have to bring, a person begins to feel, I'm being moiser nefesh, I'm going above and beyond. That will stir within you a feeling of genuine Avas Hashem. Now, the Stipler writes, there are many different avenues and many different aspects of Avodas Hashem that a person could go above and beyond the requirement, and that will awaken within them Avas Hashem. For example, let's say somebody toils and goes beyond the bar in Yegias HaTorah. It will stir them with Avas Hashem. Somebody who davens with extra Mesiras Nefesh, it will stir them in Avas Hashem. Somebody who gives extra tzedakah, it will stir them in Avas Hashem. Someone who's medaktek in halacha more than the requirement, it will stir them in Avas Hashem. Someone who's mezakeh the rabbim more than the requirement. Everybody in their arena, in their ability, could go above and beyond, not because you have to. Hashem left us opportunities of things you don't have to do, so that when you do them, it awakens in you Avas Hashem. So and by the way, the Stipler says that's why, in general, Gerim and Balei Tshuva actually have, in a sense, a higher madrega of Avas Hashem than FFBs. Because in their mind, they don't have to be doing this. Why are they doing it? They're doing it out of a feeling of love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even once they convert, or once they become Baal Tshuva, they're obligated, but in their mind, they're always doing it because, in a manner of something that they're not obligated to do. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. Okay, so this is a very important aspect of Bein Hazemanim. If the Zman would be the whole year, then you always have to learn. You always have to learn. You're just executing your responsibility. So therefore we have time off. And technically speaking, the yeshiva is not requiring you to learn. And now you have the opportunity to say, I don't have to learn today. I could just do whatever I want. And I'm going to, on my own accord, out of the generosity of my heart, spend time in Limud Torah, so that will stir within you Avas Hashem that the regular Zman cannot. In other words, the idea of Bein Hazemanim is that now you could learn when you don't have to learn. And actually learning when you don't have to learn has a bigger influence on you than learning when you have to learn. That's the idea, a idea of Bein Hazemanim, where you have the opportunity to learn when you don't have to learn. Now, what should a person learn during Bein Hazemanim? So this is also very important. During the Zman, they impose on you what to learn. During the Zman, they say, okay, learn Masechta, what are you guys learning? Yavamis. Yeah, everyone learning Yavamis here? So they tell you what you have to learn. Now, there's a concept in Shas, Ein Adam Loimed Ela Ma Shali By Chafetz. A person can only learn what they want to learn. So during this man, you don't always have the opportunity to learn what you want to learn. It's being imposed on you. Bein Hazemanim, you know what you should learn? You should figure out what you're interested in. You like to learn Bikiyas? You should learn Bikiyas. You like to learn Navi? You should learn Navi. You like to learn Mishnayos? You should learn Mishnayos. But everybody has to try to think, what interests me? What part of Limud Torah is I feel a connection to? I feel that it really piques my curiosity. It gets me excited. And that's what a person should learn. And once a person finds something in Limud Torah that really excites them, from there, because let's say when a person's young, they say, the learning, it's not so interesting, it's not that exciting, it's not that, doesn't grab me. So Bein Hazemanim is the opportunity where you try to identify something. Even that's why I think, I'm a big believer, you should have 5 minutes Siddharim. Mayor, hello. I'm a very big believer, you should have 5 minutes Siddharim. What's a 5 minute Seder? Let's say a person says, I have, 5 hours ahead of me. You say, I'm not going to learn for 5 hours. But 5 minutes, anybody can learn. So if you take 5 minutes of your time, and you say, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to learn something that I'm interested in, so that cheshek and that avas haTorah that you have during that 5 minutes, that will spill over to other areas of learning. So the idea of Bein Hazemanim, number one, it's to have an opportunity to do something that you don't have to do, and that will come b'nedivas halev. Number two, it's an opportunity to learn mashali by chafetz. Now let's talk about another important topic. Let's talk about the following phenomenon. Sometimes you go to yeshiva, and you have people who are very bright, and their learning comes very easy. And you have people who it's very difficult for them to learn. And sometimes a person feels that other people have an unfair advantage or they have a disadvantage. So let me tell you something very important. I've been around the block a little bit, and at the end of the day, the brightest and the smartest and the most intelligent are not in the long run always, or even in most cases, the ones who are most successful in Limud Torah. Actually, very often, people who had a very difficult time learning, in the end of the day, and I'm not saying after 1 week or after 1 month, but I'm talking about after a long time, are the ones that are most successful. There are many, many accounts of people who had extremely difficult time in Limud Torah, and through Yegiya, through hard work, and especially through Tefillah, were Zoicha to be extremely successful in Limud Torah. So the first thing is, nobody could ever rely on their own intelligence. Nobody could ever think, well, I'm extremely smart, I'm very bright, so therefore I will naturally be successful in Limud Torah. That is true by every other discipline. When it comes to mathematics, when it comes to science, when it comes to any other discipline, it is 99% dependent on a person's intelligence. By Limud Torah, even though it seems that it's mostly dependent on a person's intelligence, it's minimally dependent on a person's intelligence. It's dependent on Yegiyas HaTorah, on Tefillah, and on Siyata D'Shmaya. There are many, many Gedolei Yisrael. It's brought down in the Sefer Shalshals HaKabbalah, Reb Menachem Rikanti, one of the early Mekubalim. He was Oyev HaTorah, he loved Torah, but he was Gas HaSeichel. He was not bright at all. And he fasted, and he prayed, and his heart expanded, and he was able to understand. And one time he was davening in the shul, and he fell asleep, and a man came and he had a pail of water, and he woke him up, and he said, drink! And he drank. and the man disappeared. And all of a sudden, his seichel was cleared up. Now, I don't know what was in that potion, and don't expect to fall asleep in the shul and somebody to bring you some kind of water that will all of a sudden wake up, open up your mind. But there are many stories. He brings over here from the Stipler writes in the Chayei Olam that the author of the Chud HaMeshulash, which is biography of the Chassam Sofer, spoke about a Talmud that Reb Shimon Sofer reported about, that a 17 or 18-year-old boy came to the Chassam Sofer and he said he wants to join the yeshiva in the Pressburg. And the Bochrim heard and they laughed at the kid. This kid couldn't read Ashrei forwards. And the Chassam Sofer screamed at them. He said, anybody who wants to learn could come and learn. And the boy came. And he had a very, very difficult time. Somebody taught him a Mishnah 100 times. He still couldn't remember. But he kept at it. And u'beroiv hayamim, he was matzliach in his learning. He became the Paisek of Mattersdorf. And then he became the Rav of the city of Shalanig. And then he became the Abbezin of Naimitz. And he became one of the Gedolei Hadar. Similarly, they say about the Maram Shik, that because of his tremendous amelus, that he was zocheh to become a great Gadol b'Yisrael. The Chazonish writes that Harbe Migdolei Olam Hischilu Limudam Bimei Bachurasam Behaskama Aza. Most of the time it comes from great persistence, not from intelligence, but from great diligence. The Matei Moshe writes, Matei Moshe was a student of the Marshal, that a person should never say, how could I learn? I don't have the Bina, I don't have the Das, I don't have the Lev. Because the Matei Moshe says that there are many things in life a person will see that all of a sudden they're very expert in and they're brilliant in. And from there a person should say, the same way I'm able to do A, if I'm mispalel and if I'm diligent, I'll be able to be successful in Limud HaTorah. Says Rav Meir Karelitz, how did my brother Chazonish become the Chazonish? We know the great brilliance of the Chazonish. He was mechavein ma'oid in Shmona Esrei in the bracha of Ata Chonein. Rabbi Yeshua Heller writes in the Divrei Yeshua that when a person is mispalel for anything in Ruchnius, that is very dear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and is very quick to be accepted. My Rabbi, so now let's talk about a certain minhag that sometimes we find in the Olam HaYeshivos, and of course we have to be very careful when we talk about the Bochrim and the Yeshivos. The Medrash tells us, Al tigu b'mashichai u'vinviyai al tareyo, that chas v'shalom to criticize B'nai Torah, B'nai Yeshiva, because they're the anointed ones of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But for you B'nai Torah who are here today, it's, I believe, very important to think about this. There is such a custom among some B'nai Yeshiva, B'nai Torah. They have a certain practice that has replaced the age-old practice of smoking. They're noyeg to vape. You ever hear about such a thing? Not in our yeshivas, of course, but in maybe some other yeshivas. There's a practice of vaping. Vaping. You know those aerosol things that you plug into the wall? What are they called? Centify? So imagine how crazy somebody would be if you saw them lying on the phone with their mouth on it, and as the smoke is coming out, the perfume is going into their lungs. So you would think they would have to be institutionalized. So it's we could extrapolate, the practice of smoking. Even though people say, yeah, they used to think it was very, very healthy. Yeah, maybe some people thought that. I mean, in the Sefer Zachar Lemuriam of the Chavetz Chaim that was written more than 100 years ago, Chafetz Chaim already writes, Ishun hasigarin v'hapapirasin are mazikim laguf, and their oid gormim hezik lenishmasai. So Chafetz Chaim already writes that it's unhealthy to smoke. If somebody would, Rav Miller would say that anybody who smokes should not be considered for a shidduch. The first question a prospective father wants to ask about a boy is, does he smoke? If he smokes, then he should not be considered for a shidduch, b'shum oifen upanim. That should be the first thing that you ask. Does the kid smoke? If he smokes, he's a fool. If he's a fool, he cannot be considered for a shidduch. But what about vaping? Now, I tell my kids all the time that in Slobodka they would say that worse than being a Rasha is being a fool. So you could ask on that. But Chazal say, better to be called a fool than to be called a Rasha. So how could they say in Slobodka, it's better to be called, better to be a Rasha than to be a fool? But Chazal say just the opposite. Mutav sheyikra adam shoyte v'aliyah Rasha sha'achas lefnei hamakoim. And the answer is very pashut. It's better other people should call you a fool than to be a Rasha in the eyes of God. But it's worse if God calls you a fool than if God calls you a Rasha. Now, why is it worse to be a fool than to be a Rasha? The answer is, before you could be a Jew, you have to be a human being. And to be a human being, you need to act with seichel. So, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. Everybody knows today, smoking kills you, it damages your heart, it damages your lungs, it literally damages your mind function, it severely mitigates the intellectual capacity of your progeny. Somebody smokes, they're a shaita. What can we say? It might not be their fault. Maybe they fell into bad company when they were younger, but at least they should have the good sense not to have done that. And everybody understands to consider somebody who smokes for a shidduch is just insane. So let's talk about vaping. Is it permitted to vape? So I'm not a doctor, and from the limited research that I did, I don't know how much conclusive evidence there is about the effects of vaping. One thing is for sure, there are ailments that are directly triggered through vaping. It's better than smoking, whether it's 90% better or 95%. I think they give it a statistic, 95% better than smoking. It's not right. It's 95% better than jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge is jumping off the Statue of Liberty, right? It's 95% better to jump off the Statue of Liberty than to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. Or it's 95% better to jump off the Statue of Liberty than from the Empire State Building. That really is very helpful. So there's not a lot of conclusive evidence. There are ailments that are triggered through vaping, something called popcorn lung. Many cases of very terrible depression have been triggered by vaping. Many cases of terrible heart damage has been triggered by vaping. And many people have died vaping. So you want to know, is it halachically permitted? It's irrelevant whether it's halachically permitted. So, but God says, we have a halachic principle, Shomer B'Sayim Hashem. God saves the fools. Yeah, God saves the fools. But for you to do something that renders you a fool is worse than doing something that renders you a rasha. Should a parent consider a kid who vapes for shidduchim? Stay away from him like the plague. Of course not. You got to be out of your mind to consider a kid who vapes for shidduchim. Nobody knows what it does to the lungs. Why would you? Forget about the halachic ramifications. That's probably the least of your concerns. Before you want to find out whether the person is shomer halacha, you want to find if the person is a bal seichel, as biti nasati lo ish hazeh. The guy has to be a human being. He has to be a bal seichel. And if he's taking chemicals and he's having them being pumped into his lungs and coating his lungs with all kinds of chemicals that nobody knows. Well, there's lead in there, there are metals in there, there's tobacco in there. Nobody knows what it does to the lungs. No, the answer is no. If somebody finds out that the kid vapes, the kid should not be should not be considered for shidduchim. And if somebody needs to relax, let them go for a jog. There are harbe drachim to chill out other than taking an electronic device that pumps poisonous chemicals inside your lungs. I mean, are you out of your mind? I mean, would anybody go over to an outlet, plug in a Centify, and the guy lying on the floor with his mouth on the Centify, with the smoke coming out of his ears because of that? Have a cup of coffee. My goodness. So, is it halachically mutter, shomer psam Hashem? It's worse to be a pesi than to violate whether it is or whether it's not. I mean, you're going to go, is it permitted for me to lie on the floor and have the Centify thing pump poisonous chemicals into my system? Is it worse to eat treif, or is it worse to vape? You're right, halachically it's worse to eat treif. But it's a bigger flaw in your being to be somebody who's looking for self-destructive behavior. Anyway, hope I don't get into trouble for this. I mean this with the utmost chashivos for B'nai Torah, and therefore, here's the thing. If other people want to vape, that's a halbatzara. But for a Ben Torah to do that, I mean, here's a question we always have to ask ourselves. If a prominent individual would see a Ben Torah, a Ben Yeshiva vaping, what would they think of him? Would they think that's smart, dignified practice? Or would they think it's just stupid? Question. You have somebody, a dignified person, not a tzaddik, not a dignified person. If they would look at a Ben Torah, a Ben Yeshiva vaping, would they say, that makes me respect those who study Torah? Or they say, you know what? Why are they being so foolish? Would that increase their respect of B'nai Torah? No. If anything, it would diminish the respect of B'nai Torah. Mesil Sisharm tells us about the inyan of Chilul Hashem. He says, Kol Adam Lefi Madregasai, everybody according to their Madrega, Lefi Mashu Nechsha Be'inei Hadar, and respective to what they are held in the eyes of the generation, Tzarech Sheyizbainin has to contemplate Levilti Asois Davar Bilti Hagun Leishkamaisai, not to do something inappropriate. Ki Kafi Rabbis Chashivusai V'Chachmasai, the more important and wise someone is, so too he should increase his carefulness in his service of Hashem and in his behavior. Listen to these words of Mesil Sisharm. Listen carefully. Ki kavod ha-Torah, it brings honor to the Torah. Shemisha marbe halimud ba, that the more one learns in it, kamoy kein yarbe beyoysher uvetikan hamidais. The more proper, courteous, the better his midos are, the more upright he is. If whatever is lacking in derech eretz, in tikkun midos, for those who learn a lot, goyrem bizayan la limod atzmai, is a disgrace for the Torah. And that's a chil Hashem. Here's the bottom line. If you're in a yeshiva, and you spend your time learning Torah, or if you're a chashuva balabas and you're kaveya itim la Torah, so you are an ambassador. Who are you an ambassador on behalf? You are an ambassador on behalf of the Torah. So therefore you represent the Torah. And therefore your behavior either lends more credibility to the Torah or it diminishes honor from the Torah. And the more a person learns, the more their conduct and their behavior and the way they speak and the way they dress has to be immaculate, has to be flawless, has to be something that brings honor to them because they represent the Torah HaKadosha. Do you think it brings the Torah honor when people see that you are pumping smoke of chemicals into your internal vital organs? Does that bring honor to the Torah, Or do people say, you see what B'nai Yeshiva do? Therefore, it is a choiv gamor for a Ben Torah to make sure that all of his conduct and all of his behavior is kulay oimer kavod, bespeaks honor to the Torah. Who is a greater ambassador for HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than people who spend their time learning? And therefore, B'nai Torah have to make sure they're always dressed properly, they're always neat, they're well groomed, that they're proper, right? We know that an ambassador or a politician always has to look good because they're representative of the party that they work for. So B'nai Torah represent the most important party in the world. They represent the Torah. They represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore all of their actions have to be with seichel. All their actions have to be in a way when people look at them and they say, wow, what a Kiddush Hashem. So my Rabbi say a few things. Let's review. The purpose of Bein Hazemanim is an opportunity to learn when you don't have to learn. And this way, it's a way of being koine avas Hashem. Bein Hazemanim is an opportunity to learn subjects that you enjoy learning. And this way, it engenders cheshek haTorah. We learned about, in general, it's good to pause and understand that yeshiva or limud haTorah in one's life, it's not a 20-yard dash. It's a long marathon. And through amelos, through yagia, and through tefillah, a person will ultimately be successful. I just had this chus to, we had somebody that came in for a siyum, and they had severe learning disability, and they were zeicha to finish the entire Masechta and to know it very well. Just through great amelos. So many Gedolei Yisrael did not start off with the capacity, but Limud HaTorah works differently than any other subject. And in general, a person, especially Bein Hazemanim, has to make sure that their conduct and their hanhaga is reflective of the tiferes that the Torah should bring to those who study it.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.